customers all the time. Our compliance record over the last 12 months has been outstanding. Probably you went back in time and looked at Jackson's compliance record with drinking water, this may have been the best 12 months in recent or even distant memory. We haven't had any system-wide issues since December of 22. But one of the things that remains the same is we rely on the Mississippi Department of Health's public health laboratory to conduct all of our certified required compliance testing. So EPA requires that our compliance samples be analyzed by an EPA-certified lab. And the Health Department's lab is the only certified lab in central Mississippi. And the closest private certified lab is in Purvis, nearly 2 hours away. So it's not really realistic for us to rely on a private lab when that 2-hour transport time just adds all sorts of potential for a chain of custody and or sample contamination. So obviously we're partnered with the state health department lab. So we're required to take regular monthly samples from the distribution system at 120 sampling locations throughout the city on the surface water system, and then test them for bacteria, and this total coliform and E. coli, to make sure the water is safe to drink. We're also very confident because we chlorinate our water, disinfect it. We also have UV going. The water is incredibly disinfected, and we've got a great record of that disinfection, especially, again, over the last 12 months. So we collect those samples at those 120 locations, and that's done by Jackson Water contractors or agents. Essentially, it's Jacobs who operates our treatment plant and runs the lab at the O.B. Curtis plant. And we take those samples to the state lab for analysis. Yesterday, on the 10th, we were taking samples as part of our monthly sampling routine. We took samples to the state lab for analysis, and just before noon today, we were informed that 2 of those samples tested positive for E. coli. We're also informed that 2 samples from Flowwood, also delivered to the state lab yesterday, also tested positive for E. coli. Having positive results from any system, Jackson's in particular, or any throughout the state, is fairly unusual. Having 2 positives from 2 different water systems on the same day, analyzed at the same time, seems highly suspect. You know, we all know laboratories aren't perfect, whether it's a health lab or a water lab. They're all they're run by humans. Mistakes are made. Equipment may malfunction. Cross-contamination happens. They should have standard operating procedures to validate sample results, especially unusual and unexpected results, before they take any action based on those results. We requested the state lab do that this morning when we were told about these sample results, that they validate the samples before they take any action. They chose not to do that and issued a citywide boil water notice despite our long record of excellent performance, our chlorination record, and in fact, we've had no positive tests in well over a year since Jackson Water started this work. So we've started the required process of resampling from all those 120 locations to get the state order lifted. We have to do that 2 consecutive days of no E. coli or positive hits, and barring any further analysis failures on the lab's part, I am confident we will clear all those samples and be able to lift this. It's probably really 3 days when you think of the sampling and the time it takes for the analysis to be done. So we're moving as fast as we can to get those samples back to the lab. They will do their analysis, and we'll find out where we go. I'm confident we'll be lifting the order by Monday. But again, that depends on getting great results from our lab, which is a lab run by people and isn't perfect. But we're hoping that they would validate any positives they get before they would take any further action. And with that, I think I'd like to turn it over at this time to some of our Jacobs crew. I am not a lab analysis and technical expert in water, and I think you all know that. You've pointed that out maybe a few times since I've been here over the year. But I do surround myself with great folks that can do that for us. And so I've got Yvonne Mazzalapi here she's the director of drinking water compliance for Jacobs. Again, Jacobs is the contractor that's operating our treatment plants for us and our wells. And she's got some comments to make, and then we'll open it up for questions. And if they're highly technical, of course, they will be They will be answered by Yvonne. I will take the easier softball question. So with that, Yvonne. And we have one question. Amira, do you want to see if that's a question that needs to fit in now, or is that for later?
Let's hold that till the end. Josh, I do know that you will be first. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Yvonne.
Okay. Thanks, Ted. So, as Ted mentioned, the lab, we take it really serious when we get a total coliform E. coli positive. That's given. But it is with respect to any lab that we want to take it serious and ensure that we're doing our part. But however, there's a number of factors that could contribute to this false positive for E. coli. As Ted mentioned, having two systems with total coliform positive on the same day is not all, the norm. And the reason is that how these samples are set up and what testing they're doing and how they're doing their testing and how they're sterilizing and so forth, that the lab needs to take these precautions. However, if those precautions are not done, as we know, there's human error in there. There could be instrumentation issues. There's a number of issues that could contribute to these false positives. However, with that being said, with the whole false positive, back in 2016, the EPA actually changed the total coliform rule due to the fact that this has happened in the past, where it could have been a sampler, it could have been, the contract lab, that we're using, or something that got a positive E. coli or total coliform. And why is the reason? What is the reason why this is happening? Well, that's where the new rule that came back out in 2016, the revised total coliform rule, actually stated that we are allowed as a system, when we get a total coliform or a E. coli positive or both, that we are able to confirm those samples by doing additional sampling. And that, when I say additional sampling, that is at the original sample tap that had the positive E. coli. And then we do actually upstream and downstream of that site to verify that there is an issue within the system. Once those results come back, then that's when they would determine if we had an E. coli positive with an additional positive sample. At that time, a boil water advisory would be advisable within that 24 hours. And that's how the rule was written, in order for systems not to have this stress and this added scare to our public when it comes to positive E. coli samples on the original sample. But with that being said, I do have a couple of things that, can contribute to that positive. It could be a cross-contamination within that lab. Improper handling of that sample could be another thing. Human error, as I mentioned, any of the equipment, they use incubators, they use water baths. They have control samples that actually have E. coli in it, and that's where I'm saying about the cross-contamination. That could have been an issue where they actually got that control sample out of their refrigerator and then never changed their gloves out. So if you never change your gloves out, then you could understand why we could have a cross-contamination. And usually what happens with these samples, you take 20 samples at a time and sample those. So those 20 samples can be compromised. And therefore, at the time, what happened, as we know, they probably had Jackson, our water system, and Flowwood in there at the same time in that rack, and they were doing them. They were actually sampling at the same time. Therefore, they got cross-contamination. One thing I do want to add is in our distribution, as Ted issues, we're always making sure that we're in compliant, and we're actually making sure that at no time is there any part of our system that does not have chlorine residual out there. We are making sure that we're disinfecting. At these two sites that were mentioned that had the two E. coli, One was at 2.4 parts per billion, and the parts per million, and then the other one was at 1.2 parts per million, while Flowwood said theirs was at 4. Therefore, both systems had enough disinfectant that we should never have seen a total coliform or a E. coli, especially E. coli positive. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Ted, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Yvonne. That's a great explanation. And a few other comments before we open to questions. One is people may be a little confused. We are going to continue to issue and lift boil water notices as we have been related to our pipe work. Many of you have been following the fact that pretty much on a daily basis, we've got anywhere from 10 to a couple hundred customers that may be impacted by pipe repairs we're making in the system. We believe that we need to continue to do that business as usual because, again, we don't think the E. coli was there, but we do believe we need to protect the people that we are suspect may be exposed. Again, those are precautionary boil water notices when we reduce pressure due to a pipe repair work that we're doing in different areas of the city. So that's going to get maybe folks a little confused because we'll be lifting the ones we issued, say, 2 days ago as we fixed the pipe and now know it's free. So you'll see some boil water notices lifted today, tomorrow, throughout this period, even though there's still a citywide state-ordered boil water notice. So there will be some confusion, but we believe we're operating business as usual as far as making sure our customers are protected from what we think might be the biggest exposure, which is, again, during our pipe repair work that we've been doing over the last year to a large extent. And I think that's the last real comment I needed to make on that.
Okay.
I'm sure your questions will help on the rest of this. So, Amira, you're going to pick that up now and facilitate the questions?
Yes, now starts our question and answer period with Ted and the Jacobs team. First, Josh Carter. Please take yourself off mute and ask your question.
Actually, this is Anthony, so sorry about that.
Sorry. Anthony, and the other one knows
Josh.
Sometimes.
Catfishing us, Anthony, I don't know.
Well, every now and then. And one question I have is, was there a reason that the Department of Health gave for not doing a second test or anything like that?
That's not that. From what I understand, it's not their standard operating procedure. So, it's the validation of their process is what should have happened. Or then, as Yvonne pointed out, the regulation allows a second sampling and validation from that end as well. They didn't even go, as far as we know, they didn't take any effort to validate their actual analytics to see how their lab performed those samples. Was there a possibility of cross-contamination? But they didn't provide us any definitive. That would be a question I would suggest they should answer.
Thank you.
All right, Anthony, did you have a follow-up question?
I guess I did have one follow-up question. Well, two, really. One, I know you have the partnership with the Department of Health now to do the testing. Are y'all going to change that and maybe go somewhere else, like to the Purvis lab? And then the other question is there an acceptable amount of E. coli in the water?
No acceptable amount of E. coli. We'll hit that one first. And then we're going to evaluate the pros and cons of trying to move any of this testing. But, the 2-hour transport is a big hurdle to get over. And so that'll be a challenge for us probably ultimately. But we are going to dig in. We've thought about it for a couple other lab tests we get from the state, and we haven't been fully satisfied with the service we're getting there. But again, not an easy decision, but we will fully evaluate that.
All right, Nick.
Hi there. So, a couple questions. Does the revised total coliform rule, does that require or suggest retesting of samples?
Want me to answer that, Ted?
Yes, please. Yes, please, Yvonne.
Okay. So, no, it's not a suggestion. It is part of the total coliform rule, revised rule. So anytime you have a positive total coliform or a positive E. coli, you are required by rule to take those repeat samples at that original sample location that had the positive, and then upstream of that original sample, and then downstream of that original. So like if you had one sample that had a positive, then you would be taking 3 extra samples as a repeat.
And Yvonne, we're taking those now under that requirement. We are out doing that, but that won't meet the state's requirement for lifting the state issued order.
Right. Correct.
So by issuing this boil water notice, has MSDH violated federal standard on?
No, they can do more than's required. They just can't do less. So essentially, they're being overly cautious, and maybe in this case unnecessarily cautious from our perspective. But no, they can do more than's required, and that's pretty much for any regulation around clean water, or pretty much anything in the water world regulatory wise. You can always, as a state, they've got state primacy, meaning they are responsible for regulating drinking water. Even though it's an EPA program, pretty much I think only one state, maybe on the drinking water side, Wyoming is one of the western states, I think, chose not to have primacy, but I think everyone else has primacy, meaning they are the regulatory agency for drinking water within their state. Is that correct, Yvonne? I think that's right.
Actually, we have a couple others, Arizona and New Mexico.
It was one of those western states out there.
Yes.
Okay.
But they are out of step with the guidelines as they are found in the revised total coliform rule.
I wouldn't say they're out of step. They're just taking more precaution than as required with the new rule, with the revised rule of 2016.
And then last question. Does Flowwood concur with your, if you in contact with Flowwood, do they concur that this is lab contamination?
I believe they've issued a statement themselves. We have had conversations with them, but I haven't seen what they've issued. So I believe their mayor issued a statement shortly ago.
Thank you.
All right, Michael.
Hi there. First question, I was wondering, assuming that there is a holdup in getting the boil water notice lifted, does this complicate preparations for the cold water, the expected freeze, the issues that might arise from frozen pipes? Should folks be concerned about the kind of confluence of these two issues?
I don't think so at all. I'm sorry, there you go. In fact, the big preparation that, I'm not a long-term Jackson person. I've only been here since the last cold weather disaster, but they tend to prepare by buying more bottled water. Not that most people don't already have a pretty good size stock, even though we think they should be drinking tap water. But many residents in Jackson still heavily rely on bottled water, and one of their preparations, based on the historical impact of these deep freezes, has been stock up on bottled water and fill your bathtub with water for flushing if necessary. So I think nothing we're saying here about not drinking the tap water and having a boil water notice would impact any of their preparations. But that's an interesting question.
And just one follow-up question. Sort of looking elsewhere, how common is it to see false positives? Is this something that you see often, or do you have any sense of how common it is?
Yvonne, you want to speak to that?
So the uncertainty of this, with any lab or anything, it could be contributed, as I said, it's not always the contract lab, it's not always the sampler. Therefore, that's why we have additional sampling. So we can't really say it's either or in regards to this. So I think to have common, I wouldn't say it's common, due to the fact that we'd have a lot of E. coli violations throughout the country, and we run a lot of systems throughout the country, and we don't see that happening. It's a lot harder to get an E. coli positive than a total coliform positive. So due to the fact that, as you know, E. coli is a fecal bacteria that we're adding. They're adding a control sample. So that's where it's a little concerning where we don't see it a lot. That's why I think Ted and everyone is concerned, because that isn't the norm.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, and to Yvonne's point, Michael, just over the last 12 months since we've been doing this, it's almost 1,500 samples we've turned into the lab for this particular purpose, and there have been no positives, no false positives, no problems at all. It is a fairly, it is something that really caught us off guard and definitely got our attention quickly. Okay,
All
Mira.
right, Alex.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I understand what y'all have been saying about, every other test hasn't shown E. coli. There are a number of factors that could lead to a false positive. But I guess I'm just kind of confused, and correct me if I'm kind of misinterpreting, that y'all are kind of presuming that this is a false positive. I mean, why is that the presumption versus just taking the result at face value?
Well, I think it's a combination of things there, Alex. It's one, it is a very unusual positive in any water system, as Yvonne's pointed out. Two, we've got a long history. We've got no reason to think we would have had an issue. Our chlorination and disinfection, we've got great results and long positives on how that system's been running. We've had no recent plant upsets. There's nothing that would indicate to us that there should be introduction of E. coli into the drinking water system from anything that's happened in the recent past. So that's the first piece of this. And then second, really strange that in the same lab in the same afternoon we get two different water systems. There's no connection to us and Flowwood. There's a river between us. Theirs is a groundwater system. Ours is a surface water system. The source isn't the same. To get both of them having two hits during the same analysis time frame. So if they had their hit the day before, or, a week later, maybe we'd be taking, really thinking maybe this was something in the system we need to be digging harder for. But we're really confident that we've had no upsets on our disinfection, no upsets in our treatment, no positive results in the last 12 months, longer than that actually. I think the last one that the city had was August of 2022 maybe, and that was during their major process disaster and upset. So it's just such an unusual situation. But, again, we're following everything that the health department has told us to do. We're not saying don't boil your water. We're saying the state issued a boil water notice. You need to follow what the state is saying. They are the health professionals. Their job is to protect public health. We're not asking to lift the boil water notice till we meet their requirements, even though we're taking these samples from the taps that failed, and we'll test those to show that we're pretty confident that they'll come out positive. But we're going to fully support the state in what their action they've taken, because that's our job, is to follow the state regulations and what they require of us. So, I'd bet the house on that this was a false positive, but we can't prove that without the ability to go back and validate those results in the lab and see how the test was actually done. The best we're going to do is show that follow-on sampling will not have E. coli in it, and I'm confident it won't. And we'll move on. But yeah, that's I think it's a pretty fair assumption that this has been a false positive just based on those facts.
And just a quick follow up on that, Yvonne, it sounded like you're saying that the actual amounts, the ppms, that was kind of another reason for suspicion about the positive. Is that right?
Yeah.
No,
actually, it was the chlorine.
Yeah. The chlorine, we knew how much chlorine or disinfection we had in our distribution system. Therefore, the likelihood of having E. coli in our water, drinking water, would be very unlikely.
I mean, you add chlorine to kill any bacteria like E. coli. So the fact that chlorine's present and E. coli, that is really unusual. I mean, if we had gotten zero residual on the chlorine, we'd be probably saying, yeah, we got a real problem and we need to be figuring it out. But the fact that we've got I think the requirement for residual half of is 0.2, right? Is that you want
0.5.
0.5.
0.5. Yeah.
Yeah. So 0.5, and we were well above the minimum required residual, and the 0.5 is protective of public health. So, have E. coli present in water with chlorine is maybe almost impossible. Don't know that. I'm not the chemist, but pretty close to impossible.
And I'm sorry, just one last follow-up question. Are there any, you guys mentioned all the ways that false positives could happen. Are there any ways from what you know about how the state health department does its testing that improvements could be made to prevent this from happening again?
I wouldn't want to opine on that. I think, again, you should ask the state health department about what their process and procedures are to do that.
All right. Anthony, back to you.
Yeah, just a quick question. Can you say where the samples of water were taken, like not taken to the lab, but where they came from?
Sure. So one was on Sheffield, and the other was on Riverwood, both northeast Jackson, very close to the plant, really. So if you were going to pick a spot, that would not be one you'd predict. You would predict the areas furthest away from the plant, because chlorine does degrade over time in the water. And so, one of the things as a water system operator, you're trying to make sure the residual as it leaves the plant is high enough to stay in the system for the life of the water in the system. Again, we don't expect the water to be in the system very long, but you design your chlorine residuals so that you've got enough in the system for the whole time that the water's there. So the last place we would suspect would be streets and addresses that are close to either plant, where the residual would be highest as it leaves the treatment plant.
Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, Madeline.
Okay, so I'm just confused on when the next time that MSDH could possibly retest, and how fast that this could, I guess, be cleared up if they only need 2 clean tests for them to take the boil water notice down.
Sure, Madeline, but it's we have to sample from all 120 sampling locations, permitted sampling locations, and then they have to run the test. So. And the test is a test that isn't instantaneous. It takes a number of hours for each test, basically overnight in most cases, for them to run the test, grow the cultures. Or not being a chemist, I don't remember exactly how it works, but from way back when, I know you put this on a media and you end up counting the coliforms. I'm not sure what happens on the E. coli, but there's methods that takes time. These are not tests that you can do in 15 minutes and get a result. It's hours. So we're going to have to take 120 samples, 2 consecutive days. The lab's going to have to mobilize to have enough people in to process all those samples. And so we take them, I don't know, I doubt we'll get 120 done today, but I'm not sure where we are on that. But I would say we would plan on getting all samples done tomorrow, the first set to the lab. They would run those tomorrow. We would get a second set to them on Saturday. They would run those on Saturday. We would get the results on Sunday, sometime probably afternoon, midday time frame, if they've got them all run on Sunday at the appropriate time. So really the earliest we would get the green light would be sometime Monday, unless something got even faster. But that's really the best case scenario right now. That take care of it?
Do you have a follow-up?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, Nick, you're next.
Hi, yeah. Can you tell us a little bit more about how, in your opinion, MSTH's lab is not fully adequate for the purpose it serves?
I don't necessarily have that opinion. I just say it's the only option we've got right now. So, I would hope that their processes are set to deal with situations like this. But and they probably are. Maybe they are doing an analysis of how this happened, but meanwhile they've taken this action. So I don't know if that's a lab, health department. I don't know where the changes need to be made, if there any changes need to be made, but that would be a place for you all to maybe do a deep dive with them if they're willing.
You said you had some other issues with the lab that had y'all talking about how to solve.
That's been some timeliness on some other sampling events, some things that we would have liked to have done faster. Not any concerns about the quality on those, but it was timeliness.
Okay. And then can you speak a little bit about how an event like this, a false positive, if that is what this is, kind of damages the recovery and the rebuilding of trust in Jackson's water system?
Yeah, we were crushed, to be honest. The Jackson Water team, Jacobs, we were actually together doing our normal Thursday morning management team meeting when we got the word, and I would say we all took it very personally. We've worked, all of us have given a tremendous amount of our lives to try to get away from the Jackson Water reputation, to make sure folks are getting safe drinking water all the time. Everybody's getting it. I feel like, this is a kick in the gut for the whole team, that we have done wonderful things, we have made amazing progress, and to not have at least the benefit of a validation of the results before this was let really puts us back into that old school Jackson fear of the drinking water. It's going to drive people to drink. We're trying to get people to quit drinking bottled water. Across the United States, the biggest consumers of bottled water, the people who are spending the most money on bottled water, are disadvantaged communities. If you want to follow up on that, you should read some of the writings by Manny Teodoro. He's a professor at the University of Wisconsin. He's got a book, The Prophets of Distrust, which really point out that bottled water is really disproportionately consumed and purchased by low-income, disadvantaged communities. And there's lots of potential reasons for that, but we really don't think that, as a water purveyor, providing safe tap water, we need to build confidence around that, not just in Jackson, but across the country, to relieve these disadvantaged low-income communities from the burden of having to purchase bottled water. I think $1.4 billion of SNAP benefits are spent on bottled water. And yet there's a direct correlation between income and education, meaning the less education and lower income spend more of their money or buy more bottled water than people with higher education, higher income. It's also creating a distrust in government that over the last 20 years, if you follow the rise of consumption and sales of bottled water and the decline in trust in government, they're pretty much directly correlated. So this is a huge issue. So when you issue a boil water notice that may not be fully vetted, we haven't done the validation, you've just created distrust of tap water for 160,000 people, and they're just going to say, well, I'm just not going to worry about it. I'm not going to drink the water. So this was hugely damaging to us, hugely damaging to our industry in general. It's going to be seen, if you follow Teodoro's conclusions, it's going to cause distrust in government and distrust in water in similar communities, not even adjacent or even in Mississippi. As this word gets out, and this will, you're all going to write something about it. If they believe that this is truly a citywide boil water notice for E. coli in the water, there will be a number of people that will no longer drink tap water as a result of this, and they won't be just in Mississippi. And so, this is tragic. And we took it very personally, and we're doing everything we can. Our poor restaurants and businesses that depend on water, they were just sort of coming out of this, PTSD around regular citywide boil water notices and starting to feel confident. This is going to impact them. I'm just extremely frustrated where we are, Nick. And I'm hoping that what we can do here and tell you and you put out in the press will maybe get a few people to have a seed of doubt that this was really required, and that maybe this was an overreaction on the part of the state. But this is setting us back maybe a year from where it's taken everything we can do to get a few more people in the city to drink tap water and have trust in it. And to the extent we can get the facts out about this one and get people to think, well, maybe there was a reason that this happened that wasn't related to the quality of the water. That's essentially what we're doing. If we put out bad water, we're going to tell you. We've been telling you every time we have any issues. But this one's a real blow. Anyway, thanks for the question.
Nick, did you have a follow-up question?
No, thank you.
Okay, Cameron.
What would be your message to the people who are affected by this right now? I know you said it'd be setback, and if people are just fearful of this notice that they've seen.
Yes, my message is this. I truly believe that this was a false positive, that this isn't business as usual, and they won't see these again unless there's another problem in the lab. And I would encourage them to reach out to the Mississippi Department of Health about maybe they need to change their procedures. But it's obviously, as Yvonne pointed out, they're overly conservative based on the requirements of the 2016 revision to the E. coli and whatever else we're talking about. I'm losing my train of thought. but the regulation that's in place, they're a little, they're I'd say more than a little. They're just being way conservative, and I don't think they're fully appreciative of the damage that conservative approach does to water systems, the trust in drinking water in general. And so I think my message to everybody else would be, petition, look at what you can do to influence the health department's reactions to water issues in the state.
All right. Did anyone else have any questions? If not, Ted, I'll let you close us out with any remaining remarks that you have, and also I'll send that to members of the Jacobs team if there's anything they need to clarify.
I think we're in good shape. I thank everyone for joining us today. Again, the point here is we are a very different utility than we were a year ago. We don't anticipate anything like this happening again. But false positives are a challenge, and we need some support from our lab to make sure they've got sample validation processes in place, and the health department uses those as other regulatory agencies do with other water systems across the country. But beyond that, we feel like we're providing safe drinking water every day. We made huge progress in pressure in the system. In fact, we were celebrating this morning that we were seeing the highest pressures we've seen in South Jackson since we've been doing this. We are making progress. The system's getting better daily, and we're just going to continue to be focused on that. But our focus is on safe and available drinking water, and we aren't going to lose sight of that. And we'll keep plugging away. But thank you so much.